Hello, welcome. Bathrooms are down there. It is so interesting that you ask because we have some pictures in our collection and we have several magazines. I don't have really quickly. She's up here. Yeah. They really want to take yeah,
Where they process that, was that at the bottom of Sheridan Street Hill, like where the Toski has theirs? So
yes. Yeah.
Wasn't that called Pleasant Valley?
I don't know about that.
Pleasant Valley.
Could be. Yeah. I've been trying to determine if the building is still there.
Well, yeah, that's what I.
Because there's several old barn type things there, but is one of them the building? I don't know. Yeah, I had I don't remember what his title was. Someone from the Michigan Historical Association gave a talk on Zoom for us one winter, maybe 2 years ago. Yeah. Kapok's what they have in Japan, and ours is milkweed.
They must be similar, obviously they have similar qualities.
Right. All right, so now I've lost my screen again. Here we go. Okay, welcome Zoomers. Thank you for joining us. I hope you can all hear me, and if you could mute yourselves so that all the people on Zoom can hear, I would appreciate it. And welcome to everyone here in person. And if you see somebody pop up in the waiting room, will somebody let me know so I can let them in? So we'll see if we can do all this. So welcome. My name is Jane Garver. I'm the executive director here at Little Traverse History Museum. And it's nice to see you all in person and on Zoom. Tonight we'll be talking about resort communities, and this is a replay of the 1974 talk that was given here in July, because we're celebrating our 50th anniversary as a museum, and so I'm redoing all the 1974 programs. It sounds like somebody on Zoom still has their sound on. If you could all mute yourselves. Maybe I can mute you. Maybe. If I mute. There we go. Okay. So this talk was originally given by Elizabeth Gamble, and she is on the left in the picture. So I'm not sure if it's her left or our left, but anyway, that's what it said on the diary or on the back. Elizabeth Gamble on the left. Her husband took that picture. He was a photographer. He was the grandson of the Gamble from Procter and Gamble. And they lived in China for a long time. And so this picture was taken either in China or on their travels. And then the other person who spoke that evening in 1974 was Isabel Fisk. She also was from Harbor Point. And she was, in 1974, the longest summer resident on the point. And so Mrs. Gamble asked Miss Fisk to give the talk because of that, and also because she had experience giving talks. She was a professor at the University of Cincinnati, and she was a world traveler and lecturer, known for making color films to illustrate her talks. And so she was asked to come and give this talk here. So how did resorters get here? I read a lot of descriptions of the different trains. Beginning in 1874, they could take the train here. And so I tried to make this diagram to explain it a little bit better. So, helps if I turn this on. Trains came from St. Louis, Indianapolis, and Louisville to Richmond, Indiana. The train originated in Cincinnati and met up with these other trains, but you didn't have to switch trains. They just attached the cars to the train. So the train originates in Cincinnati, it gets to Richmond. They've got a few cars or people with their private sleeping cars that just then get attached. And they also had through sleeping cars, so public sleeping cars and private ones. Then they went to Fort Wayne, where some cars were attached that had come from Chicago. And then they came north. And they did stop along the way, Grand Rapids, Traverse City, et cetera, and came to Petoskey. They didn't start going to Harbor Springs until a little bit later. They would leave Cincinnati at 5 p.m. and arrive in Petoskey at 8 a.m. So not bad, especially if you have your own sleeper car. The train employees called the train the Sneezer because of all the hay fever people that were coming up on the train. And many businessmen would come and get their family settled for the summer. And then they actually would come up for long weekends throughout the summer because it wasn't too bad if you could leave at 5 o'clock and get here at 8 o'clock in the morning. Another way to travel north was the Manitou, a 3,000-ton passenger ship that made 3 round trips from Chicago weekly. It left Chicago at 4 p.m. and it arrived at Harbor Springs at 10 a.m. We went to Harbor Springs because Harbor's deeper over there. And then you could ride, once the train got going around the bay, a little bit later, you could ride the train for 15 cents. Or the ferry that went around the bay, also 15 cents. You would buy those tickets at the GRNI. And you could buy the Grand Rapids in Indiana, you could buy ferry tickets and train tickets. And you could buy a booklet of them and use them sort of interchangeably and go around the bay. It was 25 cents round trip in 1897. So all these resorters are coming, and when Mrs. Gamble and Miss Fisk gave the talk, they started with Harbor Point because that's where they lived. So we'll start across the bay and work our way back. The land for Harbor Point was purchased in 1878 for $12,000 from Father Wycamp. And there's still speculation about, did he own the land in the first place to be able to sell it? But anyway, it was a group of people from Lansing. So they had come up on the train and saw that that it would be, they thought, a great place to spend some time, spend the summer. It was relaxing. And so they got together and bought this land. They formed the Harbor Point Association in August of 1878. They elected a board of directors, all Lansing men, and they developed association rules. So right away after they purchased this land, they had a plan. They hired a landscape architect and laid out the park and the lots. There were 14 stockholders originally, and in 1880, the hotel was built. So if you were a stockholder and you had the opportunity to build on a lot. A lot of them had 2 lots or 3 lots, so they could build bigger things. And there were all kinds of rules about your house had to be worth a certain amount, so you couldn't just have a tent on your lot, that kind of thing. Oh, doesn't want me to advance. There we go. The lighthouse was built in 1884. So the lighthouse came after the resort, which I didn't think in my head that way, but that's what happened. The Harbor Point Clubhouse opened in 1897. So they had the hotel, but the association didn't like how the hotel was being run. And so because they had contracted with somebody to manage it. And so they built the clubhouse and contracted with somebody to manage it. So it seemed like it was the same thing, but anyway, they felt like they had more control over it. So they built the clubhouse. They added, it started with 50 rooms. It was later expanded to 150 rooms, and it cost them $20,000 to build. And I was reading about all the problems they had with their contractor, which sounds familiar. So exactly. He quoted them some very low rate, and then he realized he couldn't get any materials or, all the regular stuff.
It's still there.
It's not there. No, it's not there. So,
But it was on the point.
On the point.
Entrance.
right. No, it was on the point. No. Mm-mm. This was the Harbor Point Entertainment Hall, which seems to be different from the clubhouse. And all of these resorts, as I'm reading about them, had different entertainment halls. So that was where you went for a dance, for to play cards or have card parties. A lot of them had bowling alleys, different things. In the early 1900s, there were 67 stockholders. So they started with 14. Now there's 67, about 25 years later, 20 years later. The association decided to make some rules about how to behave when you were on the point. So these rules included no fishing, gambling, or games such as croquet on Sundays, no swimming without appropriate swim costume, and no dogs. Which I thought was really interesting. No dogs. Here's the beach. The horse-drawn taxi and delivery service began in the early 1900s. And the association had the Pointer built as a water taxi. My information said 1929. If you go to the Pointer's webpage, it says 1934. So somewhere early 30s, they had the Pointer built as their water taxi. The Pointer room today is what was the boathouse for the Pointer when it was their water taxi.
It's the pointer that Stafford is still.
Yes, it's that same boat. Yep. So that was the Harbor Point water taxi. They used it to get from Harbor Springs to the point. Or they would have the carriage that would take them, you know, so either way. Here's some boating on Harbor Point. And the Harbor Point dock. So I was reading different little memories and reminiscences that different people had put together. And someone talked about how you would watch the boats coming, and if you saw the boat coming, then you'd run down to the dock so that you could meet the boat. Another person talked about before they had electric lights, how she really liked, I think this was the Miss Fisk who gave the talk. She loved how pretty it was because they all had kerosene lamps that they would hang on the porches, and they would colored cellophane around the kerosene lamps and it was really pretty to see all the lamps on the porches at night. So she didn't seem very happy about electricity. I don't know. Here's the boardwalk. Whoops. So we have this really amazing scrapbook called Woods and Water Vacation. And in the scrapbook, they go around to all the different little places in northern Michigan. And one of the places they go is Harbor Point. So the caption says the beginning of a delightful walk. And I love these pictures because they're just candid pictures of these people on vacation. Along the outside of the point. And this caption, it says military cruisers. I really doubt that's what it is, but that's what that person thought when they took the picture. And then they have some postcards in there. Oh, my internet connection is unstable. I hope not. They have some postcards in the scrapbook as well that are similar to ones that we have in our collection. But this one's got the horse, so you can see the carriage there. And here's another little carriage. Looks like that horse is right in the water. Right on the beach. I don't know. I don't know when they started really closing it off. No. So moving around the bay, just a little way to Wequetonsing. This is the 1902 plat map. I love maps, and the 1902 plat maps are beautiful. So I think this gives you a really good look at Wequetonsing and how it's laid out, especially being able to see the railroad tracks and where they were in relation to everything. And there was a whole description about how they had their lots turned the other way. They were really trying to get so that everybody had lakeside, and then they realized they couldn't do that. It wasn't going to work. So Wequetonsing was founded by Presbyterians from Michigan and Indiana as the Presbyterian Summer Resort Association in 1878. So Harbor Point and Wequy are the same year. The land was given to them by the village of Little Traverse, now Harbor Springs. And this gives us a good idea of the layout. So they began as an encampment like many resorts did. So here they are camping out. There are a lot of artesian wells in Wequetonsing. If you've walked through there, you've seen some of them. Yeah, it's a little bit later. Yeah, just a couple years later. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Here's the hotel Wequetonsing. So the resort had a grand opening. It featured a speech about Abraham Lincoln by the former Vice President Schuyler Colfax, who visited Chautauquas after retiring from government service and gave talks. That was his retirement gig. He traveled around giving talks. And what he did was give his famous Abraham Lincoln speech. And that's what it says in the article, that Vice President Colfax was here to give his famous Abraham Lincoln speech. Isn't that what you would want to hear at the opening of your resort? I don't know. They reorganized as the Wequetonsing Association in 1880. So they were called the Presbyterian Summer Resort Association, and then 2 years later, they changed it to Wequetonsing. The Wequetonsing Hotel dining room was expanded in 1888 to seat 200 people. And the hotel was demolished in 1964. Well, is it, or did they make something up? So they say different things about calm bay and calm place to rest and different things like that.
So they
Sometimes, or, you know, they would hear people saying a name and then not really be able to say it or write it down. And so, just like Petoskey isn't Petoskey. Really. Let's see. So, they built the Assembly Hall in 1888 and replaced it with a casino. Now, a casino in those days didn't mean a casino for gambling. A casino was like the entertainment hall, the place where you went for the dances and the bowling and all that stuff. And in fact, they did have a bowling alley at their casino. Several of the cottages were designed by the architect in 1895. By 1908, the resort guide, and I've got some of them over here, describes it as impossible to acquire property and all built by 1908. Wequetonsing was full. So the resort guide suggests that you might be able to rent a room at the hotel, but if you were hoping to build a house there, you're not going to have any luck. It's full. The hotel was the Wequetonsing Hotel. Yep. At one time, they had multiple train stops. The suburban train stopped 3 times in Wequetonsing, like at the east edge, in the middle, and at the west edge. So you didn't have to walk very far. No, but it talks about East Wequetonsing and West Wequetonsing. So they stopped at the edge, in the middle, and at the other edge. And of course, people spent time boating. So we're just about every single one, we have a picture of people boating. And then the people in the Woods and Water scrapbook also went to Wequetonsing. So this first picture is the Roaring Brook edge of the shore walk. And this is the Harbor Spring edge of the shore walk. And you can see that they still had boardwalk and not cement sidewalks then. And some pretty views with the postcards. The association owns the land. It's like Bayview. As far as I know, now it was that way. I think it still is that way. I don't know. Yeah. Right. Yep, that the association owns it. So here's Roaring Brook. Again, with that 1902 plat map.
So is that just farther down?
Yep. Yep, so there's Wequy and then Roaring Brook is next. Yeah. Right. Yeah, no, so Roaring Brook is another little one. Yeah.
And what we found in Roaring Brook was facing religiously or? Private investors.
So that one, I couldn't find a lot of history on Roaring Brook. But I have been trying to talk to my sister-in-law who lives there, but haven't had a chance. So yeah, I couldn't find a lot of history about them. The resort guides talk about it, way back. It's suggested as a place to go. It has 130 acres. And in the guidebook, it says the name is a misnomer because the brook is the gentlest and quietest of streamlets. It's not roaring, so you shouldn't be afraid to go there. It's really lovely, they say. Work on the resort began in 1893 with the Roaring Brook Inn opening in 1894. So I think that this one was more that somebody built a hotel and then people started coming to the hotel and then they decided, oh, I would like to live here. And so they started building cottages, I think, but that's just my guess. The Roaring Brook Inn had 3 stories with spacious, airy rooms, according to their brochure. An elegant dining hall, 3 great fireplaces, wide verandas, and balconies. So, the cost of the room and board for a week in 1900 was $8. So a whole week. Room and board. The cost of the train from Chicago to get here was $15. So it kind of gives you an idea. The inn added bowling and a cozy smoking lounge. Again, according to their brochure. And our friends from Woods and Water also went through Roaring Brook. This is 1908 is when the Woods and Water scrapbook was made. So here's the Roaring Brook shore. And then almost all the pictures of Roaring Brook are just the woods or people in the woods. So the brook just before entering the bay and the brook by the roadside. So I guess that was the big attraction, was if you're in Roaring Brook, you want to go see the brook. So they took pictures of it. Here's some more Roaring Brook. Again, it's all just people in the woods. A delightful nook near the springs, says. More Roaring Brook, walking to the inn. And Lover's Lane is all the postcards that we have for Roaring Brook say Lover's Lane. Yep. Exactly. Yeah. So this one is the brook and the woods. Yeah, it really is.
That's why it's nice to see all those lots. With what I would assume would be housing.
Yeah, I think so. And then we get to Mononaqua, which is the smallest one. So this one had an interesting land history. A woman named Anna Hamburger, isn't that a great name? Bought the land that Mononaqua sits on from the state of Michigan as part of the Swamp Land Act. So I wouldn't think of that as swampland, but it was in the Swampland Act and she bought it. She sold it to Charles Noble in 1871. So this is before the trains were even here, that she had purchased it, like early she purchased it. And then Charles Noble gave it to his sons, who sold a strip of it to the railroad in 1881. And it was because they sold that strip of land that the railroad was able to make that suburban train go around the bay, because they owned all of this land. Then they sold the rest of it to a group of investors. And this is 1882 or 3, to Charles Palethorpe and Albert McCabe, who were law partners. Charles Palethorpe is a big name here in Petoskey. And he was a lawyer, but he had a real estate firm with Albert McCabe. Francis, yep, and Dutch. So here's, this is Charles and then his daughter Frances. And so Frances is the one who signed the deed or the property but for her father. So I don't know, maybe he was out of town or something. Let's see. So an advertisement for land at Mononaqua, which is, Charles Palethorpe had this ad in the newspaper. And he describes the fine beach, the beautiful forest, and the beautiful spring brook that flows at the rear of every lot. It also says in the ad that suburban trains pass through every 30 minutes. And this was interesting to me, that there's a bike path around the bay. So now the bike path is made from the train tracks, but this is what he said in his ad, that there's a bike path around the bay. Swimming in this part of the bay was not possible. The water was terrible, but over at Mononaqua, it was good. And so people, even from Petoskey, were taking the train to go swimming at Mononaqua. And they were able to do that until 1949, when the association put up a fence. The Mononaqua Inn opened for guests on August 15th, 1914. So they're a little bit later in starting to build things. So it was just a beach stop for a long time. And then they built the inn in 1914. And the first cottage wasn't until 1916. The off-field cottage, but it's also called the annex, and it was an annex to the inn or the hotel. So people, it wasn't, a family wasn't living there at first. They were using it as part of the hotel. In 1918, they hired Guy and Bertha Walter to be caretakers at Mononaqua. They oversaw the inn, the bathing pavilion, and the annex. And they were also in charge of property transactions and maintenance, and they eventually bought their own property there. More and more cottages were built throughout the years. So we have this Mononaqua book, which is where I got a lot of the information that the association put together. And this is a double-page spread in the book of all the cottages. So you can see there's not a lot at Mononaqua compared to some of the others. This is the Mononaqua Beach Club in a 70s photo. The Mononaqua Corporation, they actually call themselves, not association, donated 100 acres of land to the Little Traverse Conservancy in 1977. In part to sort of seclude themselves. Yeah. Which brings us to Bayview, which is the biggest. So again, this is 1902, the 1902 plat map. I just think they're so pretty. Whoever made these maps really did such a nice job with the colors. So in 1875, so this is also the earliest one. The trains came in 1874, and Bayview starts right away, 1875. The Michigan Methodist Episcopal Church appointed a committee to organize a Michigan Campground Association. And so this was just the Michigan Methodists, basically. They made up a committee and said, we want to create a Chautauqua, a Michigan Campground Association. And part of that committee's job was to choose the location, and they chose Bayview. It's about 350 acres and has over 500 cottages. In the late 1880s, the Bayview Assembly became a pioneering institution in public education with an ambitious summer university, a home study program, enrolling men and women across the nation. And we have a lot of their home study books, their catalogs, and the home study encyclopedia, basically, that you would get. And so you could take the course and learn all kinds of things. Which surprised me when I didn't know that they were a university. So the book says Bayview, and I'm, oh, well, I'll get some information about Bayview. And really it's about Greek statues or something. And I'm, what is this? But it's because they had a university. or they called it a university. It wasn't the same as what we think of a university today. And they were also a Chautauqua, which attracts tens of thousands of visitors. Well, it's from Chautauqua, New York, which is a place of learning. So just what Bayview is, where people come for the summer and have music and education classes and all of that kind of thing.
A lot of people, a lot of people, they would travel and then they're like, oh, we don't, maybe we'd like to put one here. So that's how they spread, because the people from New York can reach you. Beautiful parts of the country. So it's
Right.
this whole point.
Choosing some really pretty places, so choosing Bayview.
There's 4 pillars. of religion, education, don't know all the Chautauquas. They do have a plan.
Yes, the Bayview has that plan, that's a big deal.
Yes. I'm sure
Yeah.
they got-
Well,
Because they're all.
just wonder, what was the reason that all that small professors I wonder if it wasn't because of the change.
Well, a lot of it was the railroad. So the railroad came here and then they needed people to ride on their trains. And so they were promoting, the railroad was actually building hotels and then promoting that you should come here. So these brochures are put out by the railroad to tell you about how great it is here. And these resort guides, some of these were put out by the railroad, and they're really great to read because they've got these long detailed, you can picture yourself walking through the place and they're describing all the activities you can do and all the things. And so of course you'd want to come here after you had read that. But yeah, it was really the railroad wanting people to come. Right.
That was big. That's like really.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So it really, music was a big part of Bayview, from the beginning, a big part. But they started camping just like they did in other parts. But it wasn't too long before they started, building the cottages. Here's the chapel. That's actually Chief Petoskey in that picture. Which I thought was cool. This was a stereo card for the stereoscopes that they made as a fundraiser. Mr. Conable took the picture. So cottages. And some people. Park. So they're organizing by, let's see, by 1877, they've got streets and parks and public areas, and 20 cottages had been built by 1877. By 1887, they had 125 cottages. So in 10 years, a hotel and a chapel. And the university was begun in 1886. The School of Music was what they had. And Albion College conducted summer school on the grounds from 1917 to 1969. So Albion started their having college classes pretty early. The suburban train, of course, stopped in Bayview. They had 3 stops in Bayview, at the Bayview Depot, at Reed Avenue, and Edgewater. But when they began in the summer of 1875, H.O. Rose, who was a Petoskey guy, laid down wooden tracks and purchased a trolley car in Kalamazoo because he had promised that they would be able to get to Petoskey. But the trolley was pulled by a mule. So they pulled it up and then let it come back down. But then after that year, they actually had a real train that would take them to Bayview. They didn't have to ride in the trolley. But we have a trolley today, so. Here's the Bayview Inn, which was originally built in 1886. It's the oldest continuously operated summer hotel north of Grand Rapids. It was the Howard House when it was in 1895. The dining room seated 150 people, so a little bit smaller than some of the other ones around the bay. It became known as the Bayview Inn in 1935. And some people who know cars could tell us what year this picture was taken, but not me. Anybody? Yeah, somebody would know. I don't know, the cars look a little smaller than, yeah, they don't look so huge. Yeah. I don't know. Dudley Verner was the organist at Bayview. He is known for his song, The Sweetheart of Sigma Chi, that he wrote at Albion. So remember, Albion was having classes. Well, he was at Albion in 1911. And then he and his brother started publishing music, but he played the organ at Bayview. His family cottage was called The Farm. He also studied music at Juilliard. And he played from 1915 into the 1950s at Bayview. J. Will Callahan, also a composer, wrote Smiles, had a cottage in Bayview, and also lived in town. He was the lyricist, and someone else wrote the music. He was partially blind, and he came here to have Dr. Raycraft help him with his eyesight. Some other people who have visited Bayview, because of course they have a huge program of speakers every single summer. So Helen Keller has been there, William Jennings Bryan, Booker T. Washington, the vice president under Wilson Marshall, who stayed at the Cushman Hotel and walked down here to Mineral Well Park frequently, but he also stayed at Bayview and spoke at Bayview. So lots and lots of people have been here. Another hotel, the Bayview Hilton Hotel. Terrace Inn. I really like that picture because there's so many pictures of groups of people standing on the steps of a hotel. Here's just another one. The Bayview Dock. And look how dark the smoke is from those boats. So it seems like it would be great when you hear about all those boats, but it's a lot of smoke with those and the trains combined. And how many people are on the boat? Yeah, look how many people. We think it's crowded now. Look at that. Campus Club seems like a classic Bayview picture. And the Springs. So that's the resorts. Upcoming events next Thursday, a week from now, we're having our 1974 night. We're celebrating 50 years as a museum. So it's an open house style event from 5 to 8. Drop in. We'll have music and food and games and fun, and you can see the museum and walk around and enjoy it. And if you'd like to dress up like it's 1974, please do. August 1st, which is also a Thursday, we have Michelle Cassidy coming from Central Michigan University, and she will be talking about Company K, the all Native American Civil War company. August 15th, I will be talking about King Strang because that was the Historical Society's 1974 program about King Strang and Beaver Island. August 16th, Friday is our corn roast, and tickets are available now. September 12th is our annual meeting, and we'll be talking about the history of the museum. And in September, I'll be doing the Sister Cities program. So our sister city is a city in Japan. And so that program started in 1974. They were hosting some people from Japan, and they didn't actually do a September program because they were hosting these people from the sister city. So I will just be talking about that. So you are welcome to walk around the museum or to take a look at some of the books. I've got one on Mononaqua, a couple on Bayview, and then some of these guides that are really fun to look at. So help yourself to those if you like. Thank you everyone on Zoom for joining us. Have a good night.
Thank you.